Please allow me to speak without mask because we have some enough distancing. First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Roca, President of IFRC, for his very kind and warm introduction. You know that we have been working very closely while working as the Secretary General of the United Nations. I have been working very closely with the IFRC and International Red Cross Society. As you may be well aware, as was introduced by Mr. Roca, I regard myself still as a Red Cross man. This is exactly the place where I was recruited by this Korean National Red Cross Society as one of the 4 student representatives to the Red Cross gathering in the United States in 1962, just 60 years ago, almost 60 years ago. And I feel very proud that I have been able to do something for humanity and peace and development, and also disaster risk reduction as a Secretary General. So please allow me, first of all, thank Dr. Shin Hee-young, President of the Korean National Red Cross, and I'd like to also thank all distinguished participants and guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great honor and privilege to speak to you today and deliver these keynote remarks here at the 3rd International Forum on Disaster Resilience. My deep appreciation goes to the Asia Pacific Disaster Resilience Center, APDRC, for hosting this timely forum. Indeed, this forum takes place at a pivotal juncture, not only for boosting global cooperation and partnership to take decisive and expedited action on climate crisis, but also for strengthening community resilience. My special thanks goes also to the forum's eminent co-hosting organizations, the Korean National Red Cross, the International Federation of Red Cross IFRC, Red Crescent Societies, the UNDRR Office for Northeast Asia, and Global Education and Training Institute, Korean Society of Hazard Mitigation, the Korea NGO Council for Overseas Cooperation Development, and the Climate Change Center. This dynamic international forum has brought together a wide variety of key stakeholders from the public sector, humanitarian organizations, academia, NGOs, international organizations, and the private sector. I'm confident that this forum will help scale up disaster risk reduction, boost climate change adaptation, and synergize a green recovery from COVID-19. And I thank you, the distinguished 3rd International Forum on Disaster Resilience participants, for your efforts in this regard. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, today we find ourselves at the center of a variety of converging global crises and increased uncertainty. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic continues to upend our economies, societies, and daily lives. Climate change is rapidly worsening, with the superstorms, extreme heat, flooding, fires, and droughts all expanding in both frequency and intensity. Great power tensions, conflicts are growing, hindering global cooperation when it is so much needed, so greatly needed. At the same time, new technologies are altering how we communicate, how we live and work. Sweeping advances in the fields of artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and robotics are rapidly changing our countries, cities, and businesses. However, despite these challenges, we have made progress in key areas, and I believe we have invaluable opportunities to change the world for the better. You might have noticed that after my retirement from the United Nations, I established Ban Ki-moon Foundation for a Better Future. This is exactly what I am doing and I'm going to do. It is important that all the people, regardless of your ethnicity, wherever you are coming from, we have to make sure that we leave this world for a better world to our succeeding generation, not only for us. That's why I am still committed to continue my work, which I used to as a Secretary General at the United Nations. Ladies and gentlemen, today I'd like to speak to you about the great importance of coming together in partnership in order to holistically and urgently act on climate change and strengthening community resilience. First, I will underline the reality where we are in the climate crisis and the necessity of elevating efforts to scale up adaptation. And second, I will underline how international cooperation and partnership are the keys that can unlock the achievement of climate action, disaster risk, and sustainable development goals. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, climate change is fueling insecurity, conflict, refugee flows, and public health risks all around the world. And these threats do not discriminate. All nations are and will continue to be endangered by them as the world continues to warm. As a result of climate change, rising sea levels are an existential threat to many small island developing states, as well as some of the world's most populous and economically important cities around the world. If you go to many small islands in Pacific and Caribbean, their countries are submerged very gradually underwater. I myself visited small islands, such islands like Kiribati, Marshall Island, and many others in Caribbean countries. I have seen for myself that these islands are just disappearing. I was told by older people, elderly people, that one day, far distance, all these islands are just disappearing gradually because sea level is rising. Heavy rains and dramatic flooding recently submerged parts of central China underwater, killing more than 300 people, trapping passengers in subways, and displacing more than 200,000. This happened recently in China. In India, thousands were rescued after the Ganges River flooded after days of torrential rains. This summer, we witnessed much of the Mediterranean countries engulfed in menacing flames as wildfires burned out of control in dangerous dry conditions in Greece, Algeria, Turkey, Lebanon, Tunisia, and Italy. And areas of Middle East and South Asia are now experiencing heat waves so severe that doctors are sounding the alarm bells about the capacity of humans to physically withstand them in the years ahead. But warming is not just a future threat. A landmark study recently released by the magazine journal Nature says that nearly 37% of all global heat-related deaths can now be blamed on human-caused climate change. How can we mitigate these threats? Countries in Asia, like China, Korea, India, Australia, Japan, or others certainly cannot do it alone. Nor can big countries in West, like the United States, European Union, and United Kingdom, they cannot do either alone. What is indeed is an unprecedented global effort propelled by multilateralism, solidarity, and partnership. With this in mind, I'm of the view that we must urgently step up our collective efforts to cut global emissions and implement the Paris Climate Change Agreement. During my 10 years as the Secretary General of the United Nations, I am extremely proud to have prioritized climate change and elevated it as the top of the global agenda of the United Nations. The Paris Climate Change Agreement, it was signed by 195 state parties. Now it is joined by 197, almost all the countries in the world. This climate change agreement offers us a clear game plan to confront the serious threat to our planet. It sets viable targets. It has many targets according to the date, years, to impede rising temperatures, constrict greenhouse gas emissions, and spur climate-resilient development and green growth. Today, 6 years later, I still believe that Paris Agreement offers us our best hope to persevere over the dire threats to our planet, but we must now accelerate our common implementation efforts. I have been speaking out to many times. I think I'm repeating today again. We don't have a plan B because we don't have a planet B either. We have only one Earth where we are now living. That is why we don't have plan B either. That is a very important message which I have been speaking out all the times. Indeed, the sobering August released UN IPCC report, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, recently announced this sixth assessment report that the devastating picture of a worsening global climate crisis that is now, I quote, inevitable, unprecedented, and irreversible. There is no way to go back. But it also details that rapid, large-scale emission reductions can still succeed in restricting the planet temperature's rise to around 1.5 degrees Celsius. Doing so will be the difference between charting a secure and prosperous future for our future generations and one that condemns them to a planet besieged by flames, heat, and flood with more terrifying frequencies and intensity. What kind of a future do we and do you want to leave to our succeeding generation? I think we have to listen to the voices of nature. And we have to watch very carefully how the nature is becoming different. We cannot negotiate with nature. Nature has its own way to go. We have to follow the way nature goes. We cannot go against the nature. That is clear now because we are experiencing unprecedented challenges now. Ladies and gentlemen, leading humanitarian, disaster, and climate experts like yourselves have a crucial role to play. Indeed, we need an all-of-society approach underpinned by global partnership and cooperation to implement the Paris Climate Change Agreement, achieve net zero emission by 2050, build resilience, and secure a brighter future for all. It is clear that climate change is here and now. It is devastating cities all around the world and causing massive economic impact. Systems are collapsing, and inequality is magnifying risk for vulnerable communities. As such, acting now to urgently fight climate change must be the overarching task, not only of our lifetimes, but our children's and grandchildren's lifetimes as well. Only by doing so, we'll be able to transform historic global commitments such as the Paris Climate Change Agreement and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals into decisive action. I'm wearing all the times this a small UN badge symbolizing the 17 goals of the Sustainable Development Goals. That should be our guide. This also includes one of 17 goals is climate change is in here. So in tandem with rapidly cutting emissions and pursuing sustainable development, we must accelerate efforts to adapt and scale up our society's disaster resilience to the rapidly changing climate of both today and tomorrow. We should remember that the Paris Agreement calls for climate funding for both mitigation and adaptation. As such, we need all nations, particularly ahead of COP26 in Glasgow in November, to step up in the sphere of resilience. What happens next is up to us, but we must move with a greater urgency. In this regard, I am honored to tell you that currently I'm serving as co-chair for an important international organization called the Global Center on Adaptation. It's called, abbreviated GCA, Global Center on Adaptation, headquartered in the Netherlands. The center works to enhance urgent action and support for adaptation solutions to the cascading effects of climate change. We released the recent landmark report that argues it is a human, environmental, and economic imperative to expediently invest in adaptation and climate resilience. In fact, adaptation is one of the two policy responses, mitigation and adaptation. We have mostly done mitigation. We've been really trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and save fuels, energies, etc. But we need to be more future-oriented. We need to invest more for the future to adapt to changing situation. But so far, about 95 to 5%, only 5% of money has been invested in adaptation, while we've been mostly spending all the money on mitigation. But I'm now really trying to change these dynamics, making at least a 50-50 mitigation and adaptation together. Ladies and gentlemen, at the same time, we need to expand efforts to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. and make up the UN global goals realized altogether. Again, this SDG was also adopted during my time. So I'm not boasting myself, but during my time as a Secretary General, the most two important visions, Sustainable Development and Paris Climate Change Agreement, those were adopted during my time. I have really prioritized these two things. These two will be the guidelines for coming many, many years future, at least coming 50 years until at least 2050, coming 30 years. We have to make sure that by that time, we'll have to make net to zero. We have to make sure that all these greenhouse gas emissions, which we have been emitting into the sky, should be zero. This is what President Moon Jae-in had already announced, declared on October 28 last year at the National Assembly. And he has made it again firm commitment during his G7 summit meeting, during his meeting with the President Biden, during the World Summit meeting hosted by President Biden. Then I think he's going to do it again in G20 summit in October this year in Rome. Therefore, commitment is already made, firmly by. But I'm afraid that these days, I'm reading in the newspaper that the industrial sectors, that they are making some concerns about this. But there is no choice, no option at this time. We must make sure that we have to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. I'd like to, again, then how to do. There is a goal 17. This is a global partnership. As I said, not a single country in this world, like United States or European Union, however rich or resourceful they may be, they cannot do it alone. I think we have put all our hands on the deck together. Otherwise, there's no hope. China has declared that they will neutralize the economy and productions by 2060. While we are working for 2050, China is the only exception that they will neutralize the greenhouse gas emissions by 2060. That was accepted and appreciated by the international community because of the sheer size of their countries and their industrial level. Then I'm sure that by 2060 they will be able to do that. But all these countries, OECD countries, particularly Korea, must make sure that we will do it. I'm not warning you, but this is not my warning. The warning by WMO, World Meteorological Organization, and also IPCC, they announced it in last August, that while we have set our goal to limit global temperature rise below 1.5 degrees Celsius during last 150 years, since 1850 until now, we have already, the global temperature has already risen to 1.1 degrees. The remaining gap is 0.4 degrees Celsius. Can we do that? Can we make sure that up to 2050, coming 30 years, can we just control our global temperature rise below 0.4 degrees? This is almost impossible job. Unless we really make sure that we do our best effort. There should be some good energy mix, like renewable energies, many important companies in Korea too, like SK, Samsung, Hyundai, or some other big companies, they are committed to this energy, renewable energy, 100%. At the same time, we have to phase out all these 16 coal-fired plants, coal-fired power plants by 2045. By 2045. We have to make sure that by 2035, there should be no internal engine cars. I'm glad that Hyundai and other big motor companies have declared that by 2035, there will be no such cars driven by with the fuels and petroleums. And either there should be electric or hydrogen cars. This is what now the Korean government has declared and is going to work very hard. I need strong support from particularly industrial community and each and every civilians and organizations like yourself should lead by campaigning this one. Therefore, I'm really asking to raise multi-stakeholder partnership that mobilize and share knowledge, expertise, technology, and financial resources to support the achieving this net zero 2050 and sustainable development goals in all the countries. Ladies and gentlemen, in this connection, I humbly call on all the organizations and humanitarian organizations like Red Cross and policymakers, other key stakeholders to expand global cooperation and partnership to use the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals and Paris Climate Change Agreement. There is one important agreement is Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction and the New Urban Agenda. These are four major ambitious targets which the United Nations has set out. Ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude by reiterating the followings. In this age of pandemic, climate crisis, and deepening inequality, I firmly believe that we must recommit ourselves to multilateral cooperation, born out of partnerships to solve the multifaceted challenges we are now facing. Global challenges require global solutions, and such solutions can only be realized through scaled-up political, civil society, academic, scientific, and corporate cooperation at all levels across borders and seas. Just speaking very frankly, there's not much level of respect for politicians not only in our society but all throughout the world. But what is important at this time is, again, even though you may not respect the politicians, but political leadership will also be key in mobilizing multilateralism and speaking out to the citizens as well as industrial leadership. Therefore, I am also emphasizing the importance of political leadership. There is nothing easy. There is nothing which is easy. All the challenges we are facing are very much challenging ones. But I don't think there is insurmountable challenges. They are all surmountable, depending upon how strong political leadership, the political leaders and you and I have about these challenges. We need increased cooperation to adapt, as I said, adaptation, and solve the climate crisis. And these are very important ones. Now, I'm sure that in such a case, we'll be able to fight back this COVID-19 and build back better and build back greener. Not only build back better, but we must build greener. That is what we are now working. Therefore, I again humbly call upon you, eminent International Forum on Disaster Resilience participants, to collaborate with other leaders, officials, industries, stakeholders to take concrete actions toward minimizing disaster risk, achieving the UN SDGs, and accelerating climate action and adaptation. COVID-19 has underlined our inherent interconnectedness. We are all in this together. And we all need to ensure that the UN's global goals are local business around the world, in Korea and beyond. Today's interrelated challenges and disasters respect no borders. Our actions ensure a resilient and thriving planet, and in pursuit of sustainable development for our future generations, simply must transcend all frontiers. I congratulate you, ladies and gentlemen, on the realization of this forum, and firmly believe that this forum will be crowned with great success. Ladies and gentlemen, let us work together to make sure that we realize a better world, sustainable and livable societies. I think that is our moral and political responsibilities to realize a sustainable world. Thank you for your leadership and attention. Thank you very much. 감사합니다.